Dispatch 2. We knew something was up when things were starting to get weird at the grocery store. This line keeps popping into my head, or a variant of it, like someday I'm going to be an old grandma telling my grandchildren about this time, and they will listen to my storytelling, mouths agape, thinking, what a strange and distant era their crazy old yaya came from. I don't know why this scenario keeps popping into my head, but it does. My own yaya in Greek, was a survivor of the 1918 flu epidemic. Born in 1911, her parents were Greek immigrants from the rough, craggy mountains of the Peloponnese region of southern Greece, right by Kalamata, where the olives came from, and Sparta, where the Spartans came from. Her own father was an immigrant, a young man at the time, and he was a cook at the Garrison Inn in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And her mother, Anna, was a clam shucker. When you go to Newburyport, they have a historical store, but none of the Greek immigrants are written into the history. It's just smiling white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, like the Pilgrims and the Plymouth Rock type things. You can buy scrimshaw there. It used to be on real whalebone, but now they make it on plastic because of the ecological reasons. My grandmother and her younger sister worked at a textile and shoe factory before child labor laws were in effect. Except my grandmother was too slow, so she started a business of selling candy bars to the factory workers, probably other children, for a nickel apiece. She ended up getting off the factory line and expanding her business, but that's another story. I take after my grandmother in temperament. I am also too slow, and I am also physically quite delicate. Being an adjunct professor at several schools at the same time almost broke me when I was doing it. I had a terrible fall down some stairs in my early 30s, and it took me 18 months to recover. And I decided after that to take a break. Somewhere in that time, I started my own creative writing school and formed the Institute. It's like the candy bar business, like my grandmother started as a child in a lot of ways. And I haven't really understood that until now. Now with two small children, I don't know if I could go back to teaching composition or ESL like I did, especially in the pandemic. I don't know if I have it in me. I respect the work though, you never know. Trying to build my stamina back up bit by bit. This whole stay-at-home mom thing was never something I imagined I would be doing. It's so freaking hard. The quarantine just makes it harder in some ways. I keep wondering when I will fully slip into my life as a writer now that I finally know how to write. I decided that once my oldest started preschool in the fall would be my time that my career would really soar, but we were rejected from the fancy preschool near our house in the neighborhood that my family has lived in for 50 years. All of my fantasies of pushing the stroller there and walking home with a fancy latte in the cup holder in luxe exercise pants and a crisp wool pea coat to sit at the local cafe at a computer and write my novel into the fog until 3 p.m. have been dashed. It was a great and fun fantasy though. I don't have any fancy exercise pants, by the way. I just have the 8-year-old Target ones, but in my fantasy, they were fancy. By the way, those Target ones have been the most comfortable of the pandemic, I have to say. I love them. After getting rejected from the preschool, I went to watch the sunset at Ocean Beach in my car and listened to the news of the coming pandemic. And I cried, which I don't do very easily. I'm pretty stoic. And then I was crying as I took a picture of the sunset and I posted it to Facebook and talked about how disappointed I was about the preschool. And one of my childhood friends, a mom who was walking away from a difficult marriage, comforted me. She basically said that everything happens for a reason and that I wouldn't want my kid at that fancy school anyway if they didn't want me. And I would see in why this is good in the long run. In fact, many moms comforted me. The moms all knew what it meant to not have your kid in preschool, what it means to not have your kid in school, what it means for one's career. But 2 weeks later, the city shut down due to coronavirus. All of my mom friends are being expected to work from home and take care of their kids at the same time. All the burden is falling on the moms. Oh yeah, and they're supposed to still pay for their expensive preschools and daycare centers during the epidemic in order to hold their spots. What kind of shit is that? I'm the only one who can say it now because I don't have a spot to hold on to. Fuck that. There, I said it, what everyone is thinking. Right as the shelter in place happened, one of my writing clients, a midwife and an amazing poet, had these homemade tinctures and teas that she was selling to her clients. I saw her advertising them on Instagram. I bought one. It's a reishi mushroom tincture and it has antiviral properties, an antiviral tea. She left them for me and I went and picked them up. I paid her online because social distancing. When I took them home, I got a flash in my mind of my grandmother. The story that was passed down to me is that she survived the 1918 flu epidemic because her poor immigrant parents had these tinctures that her father made, tinctures full of special herbs. My great-grandfather was a medicine man, a healer. His mother was a doctor. His wife, my great-grandmother, was a midwife. They made these tinctures for wellness, or I think they called them tonics. My grandmother was a small child at the time, the eldest of 5 sisters. The story goes that her father gave the tinctures to all the Greek immigrants in Newburyport and the surrounding areas, and they all survived the flu epidemic because of the tinctures that my great-grandfather made. The main sadness of his life was that he never got them up to north to Maine to his sister, and she fell ill and died. And he died also later in an accident at the factory, tragically. My great-grandmother lived to 97 though, and my grandmother to 99. I hope to live a long time. This first weekend of the quarantine, I found out that my husband had been exposed to the coronavirus at work. We found this out after I picked up the tincture. I spent the first 2 weeks of quarantine silently shitting a brick, drinking the tincture and the antiviral tea, making agua lemon soup, and bracing myself just in case any of us got sick. So far, nobody in my family has gotten it. Luckily, we are all okay. Last week, I found out that somebody who works at the Whole Foods in SF has it. Glad we don't shop there because that parking lot is too aggressive on a regular day, let alone in COVID times. As the social fabric breaks down a bit, like the women 2 and 3 generations before me, I realize I am falling back on folklore and family. I am falling back on my roots. I am falling back on stories. And at the end of the day, stories are what is settling me. And I am still here, spry, in the middle of the night, drinking my chai to vunu tea at the kitchen table and stealing the time to write. The end.